All right, should we get going? Should we get going? Cool. I'm super excited. I've done these things before. I've been in the crypto space for 10 years. I've sat with Vitalik on a very combative panel in 2014, but I've never done something like that. So this is probably, I'm gonna probably remember that for my entire life. I hope you guys enjoy it as much. I don't know if our guests really need introduction, but I'm gonna put them on the spot anyway. So maybe we can have like a round where everyone kind of introduce themselves, and if they want to say something interesting, starting with you, Quentin.
So start over there.
I will start over there.
How you guys doing? I'm Gmoney. I'm an NFT collector, investor, and overall NFT advocate.
Hey everybody, Marguerite DeCourcel, also known as Coin Artist. I'm a game developer with NFT Games, Blockade Games. Super excited to be here.
Tom Bilyeu, co-founder of Quest Nutrition and Impact Theory, and total NFT enthusiast and anime junkie, if I may add. And as somebody who was going to film school when you were just murdering and changing the game, Quentin, I am crazy on it. I graduated film school in '98. That was
that was the
peak
time.
Pulp Fiction,
That was
man.
the time, man.
Crazy. Every one of us wanted to be you, so to be on this panel is super exciting.
Mike Novogratz. I'm usually known as the oldest guy in crypto. I run a company called Galaxy. We do all things crypto. I was actually talking NFTs in 2014. That's my claim to fame for this panel. And I'm a huge film junkie.
I'm Lady PheOnix, very honored to be here with all of you. I run Universe Contemporary. We essentially elevate culture in the metaverse. And some of you might know me from the early days of Clubhouse. So if you were in some of those rooms, let's say hi to each other.
Hi, I'm Regina Harsanyi, and I'm a time-based media specialist who works with a lot of different stakeholders to help with born digital and digitized media, including NFTs. And I'm also a major cinephile with a background in film history and work with the Museum Moving Image as one of my clients.
I'm Quentin Tarantino, playing the role of Martin Scorsese. Thank you very much.
All right. So just a quick introduction. This is going to be like a fun talk about NFTs, about art, about technology, about how all of these interconnect. But I do want to ask you, Quentin, first of all, if people don't know, Quentin today announced that he's working with Secret Network with us on releasing the original scenes, handwritten scenes from Pulp Fiction as NFTs, and there's a bunch of other secrets included in that. I don't want to spoil the party, but Quentin, you and I had quite a few discussions about NFTs. I know you've heard and been following the NFT space for a while, and I'm just kind of curious, like, why the script, why Pulp Fiction, why do you think that is the right thing to turn into an NFT?
Well, it was interesting because I first learned what NFTs were about I guess about a year and a half ago. My buddy Eli Roth told me about it, and he was describing this or that and the other. And I don't think I quite grasped it 100% at that point in time, but I was like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. And then later, about a year later, a friend of mine, Renan, brought the same thing up, and I had a little bit of more of an understanding. And then as we were talking, once I started getting a sense of what it actually really is, I was like, oh, okay. So the way I always kept using analogies for it. It's like, okay, so Bob Dylan writes the lyrics to one of his songs on an envelope. Now, he has that envelope. Now, he's not going to do anything with that envelope. Those are his original lyrics written in his own hand. But if you did an NFT of those lyrics on that envelope, and that's different than just printing it in a book or Xeroxing it and sending it out to a bunch of different people. That's this weird middle link between the one and the other that actually could become valuable, could become a thing unto itself. And depending on how, just like art, depending on how the owner decides to share it or not, all to their benefit or their whim, well, that actually sounds legit. So with that idea, I was like, well, I have the entire Pulp Fiction script written in my own hand from page 1 to the last page. It's kind of just been sitting on a binder in my office on a filing cabinet, and the only person who's ever seen it was the typist back in 1993. I think, they go, "What, you have that?" I go, "Yes." "And it's never been seen?" "No, I mean, the typist is the only person who has ever seen it." He was like, "Well, that sounds like it would be a pretty good NFT." And now, here's the thing. I did get it. I did kind of understand it, but I had a deeper look, I wrote it, so of course I'm going to be cavalier about it. You know, it literally has been sitting in my office for 24 fucking years. But when we went to take the actual notebook pages and the handwritten misspellings, God forbid the punctuation, all right, so it's almost non-existent, different names, different dialogue, different shit that's not in the film. But when we came down to actually take those pages with the frayed edges and digitize them and scan them, that was when I kind of realized what we were doing. That was when I got the idea of, oh, this is fucking special. This is really kind of neat. Forget about the fact that we were blowing the minds of the people who were doing the digitizing. They were like, oh my God, what is this? And even because again, I saw it as an entirety. But when I broke it apart and it started becoming individual pages that you found, and like there's a doodle over here, and there's a little note to myself about something else over there, or Vincent's character was named Edgar for a long time, and so like Edgar is crossed out and Vincent is written, on top of it. I was like, I started getting caught up in it. I started almost getting emotional about it, and that's when and I have to say that was when I really kind of realized what an NFT can be, and how cool it can be, and how like genuinely legitimate it can be as a piece of art.
When does the bidding start?
Yeah, that's still a secret, but like, stay tuned. It's like coming very soon, very, very soon. Tom, maybe I should ask you the next question.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. You said you are a film buff.
Yes.
All right, so I have a question. Like, I've seen tons of NFTs, starting with like, art pieces, paintings, then moving into more musical pieces and kind of art. But I think this is the first venture into the film industry, and it's not. Do you want to jump in and say?
No, although I will say from what I know that it's the best strategy so far for the film industry. But most recently, David Lynch put out an NFT on Super Rare with Interpol. And then David Cronenberg and his daughter also did an NFT with Super Rare. And then Kevin Smith, I believe, has announced doing an entire film as an NFT. So.
But that hasn't been done yet, right? I think that's a plan as far as I understand.
The first two have been done, and then I think that Kevin's is just a plan.
What was Cronenberg offering up?
There was a few, I think, but one of them it's like a 1-minute film of him looking at himself dead. Yeah.
All right, but we're still under 5. So I guess my question is like, what's next for NFTs interconnecting with the film industry? And I think that's for you, Regina, and for Tom.
One more that I should actually mention is Wong Kar-wai did an NFT, which was pretty exciting with Sotheby's.
Yeah, but are all those are they is it them creating new content? More or less.
For Cronenberg, yes. I think for Wong Kar-wai, it was something involved with In the Mood for Love, whether it was an outtake or a moment from the film.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I had pitched one of the largest management companies this idea when NFTs really started kicking off at the very beginning of this year. I said, look, somebody's going to create the merchandising memorabilia capital of filmmaking. And I think that's going to be huge. But I think the real place where this is going to change, Quentin, imagine if you're doing Reservoir Dogs and instead of having to go beg for money, you sell it as an NFT. Or let's say that you had to beg for money for Reservoir Dogs because people don't know who you are yet. When you go to do Pulp Fiction and you say, I'm doing an NFT launch, every film head like me who saw what was happening with you as an indie director would have fallen over themselves to go and invest in that because we believed that you were going to be the next big thing. And now we can get a piece of that. The royalties kick back. You're going to see this in music. You're going to see it in film, where instead of like Kickstarter or raising funds with a studio, you can get it from the fan base who are now incentivized for that to work.
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that's a more exciting version of a Kickstarter
And
kind
if
of
you
thing.
do it, I will put so much fucking money into that.
No, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that way before.
No closing deals on the panel, guys.
Yeah, I mean, you're already kind of seeing it with the communities that pop up already, right? Like, it hasn't happened with movies just yet, but it's only a matter of time. All these communities have all this IP. They want to do something with it. They have their rabid fans. And, you know, Tom, and you and I had spoken about this before where, you know, it's easy to go to Netflix. Like, Quentin, like you can get distribution very easily. But as to the point Tom was saying is back when you started your career, you know, you needed that distribution. You needed to be able to say, hey, look, I have 5,000 people that will go out and buy this as soon as I produce it and make it. And that means a lot for, like, big distribution.
You're also going to see the other crossover where these cool NFT, communities of art become TV shows, kid shows. Like I know Gary Vee with his V Friends. He's got all kinds of plans for books and shows and movies. And so we usually start the other way around, right? The movie comes first, and then you say, okay, let's make the kid's toy. But now we're kind of starting with the digital toy or the digital object, and we're going to make content out of that.
It would be kind of interesting if you broke up the film, if you had a seat, an ownership of a minute of the film, and you didn't know what you were going to be purchasing, but just as a way to kickstart. And so when the film was actually revealed, you had this powerful moment that was your NFT. I think that could be a really cool way to.
Another thing, man, and I don't know how you'd get the rights to all this stuff, but if you were to actually NFTize every frame of Pulp Fiction, let's say, the shot where the two of them are holding the guns has become like that meme image. Yeah. Holy Christ, dude, that would sell for millions for sure, tens of millions. That one frame.
To not sound like a clueless dork, how is that different from all the stills that already exist?
All right, so this is where it gets interesting. So think about
because who doesn't have that? Who didn't have that poster, that bootleg poster on their wall?
Exactly. Right-click save. Right. That's the big question in the NFT space. But here's what people aren't thinking about: the image of the NFT isn't the thing; it's the sense of ownership. Now, when you own it, now we're down to the blockchain, and this is where NFTs get interesting. At the level of the blockchain, think of that image as having matrix code inside of it, literally. And now I can detect through technology whether you have the real one or a fake one.
Gotcha. Oh,
and if you have the real one, you can come have dinner with Quentin every year, whatever, on the launch date of the film. And if you don't, you get fuck all. You get to enjoy the image, but you don't get like the matrix code inside.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, like one of the things that was actually really interesting, and I won't keep talking about myself, but one of the things that was really interesting as far as like not talking about that imagery, I had all these lawyers saying, well, we should shut all these guys down selling those black and white posters of John and Jules because it's like, no, those guys are doing me a favor, man. All right, I want those college kids to put that shit on the wall. I don't need to make money from that. I'll make money from my movie. I don't, no, those bootleggers are actually making me part of the zeitgeist.
So that's incredible that you say that, because that's literally like the entire thesis behind NFTs. When I first started getting into the space and I was buying CryptoPunks and people were like, oh, right-click save. And to your point is I was like, you're doing me a favor. Please, everybody make it their profile picture, because the more popular it becomes, the more valuable the content itself, right? And that's where that provenance comes from, where the original coming directly from you is the most valuable one.
So,
well, just to let you know, starting 3 years from now, one by one, I start owning my movies.
What?
Yeah.
That's fucking incredible.
Starting with Jackie Brown, it was a situation where 20 years later, I own the negative. All right, and then they
Damn.
started coming down from there. So Jackie Brown will be the first one that I get, and that's about 3 years from now. And then after that, like every 2 years, every 3 years, I own the next one.
Incredible.
Sovereignty is the hallmark of the space. So sovereignty
Yeah.
is the hallmark of the space. So as you gain sovereignty with the industry, make sure that in the way that you drop and bring your NFTs to market, you're doing so in a sovereign way as well.
Gotcha.
So about like data ownership and self-sovereignty, I'm fully on board that like this is the excitement behind like NFTs. So when I was at MIT, one of the projects we were working on is turning like all MIT degrees into like records on the blockchain. And today, anyone who graduates gets like not an NFT, but like his certificate also certified on the blockchain. So, but I'm kind of wondering, like, it can't just all be like roses and everything's great. Like, in what ways is the NFT-based data ownership model better? And in what ways it is worse? And in what ways should we work to improve it? Lady P, maybe that's for you.
Yeah, I mean, Guy. Tell me the question you really want. There were 3 questions there. Which one do you
Can
want?
blockchain be good or evil?
It's neither. The human blockchain is where blockchain actually starts, right? So I think a lot of people get caught up in technology, hardware, software, ones and zeros, but they forget to check in with the original technology that's right here, flesh and blood, you and me, heart and spirit. So first we have to check in with the human blockchain and make sure that we're verified and checked out here, and then we can move forward to making things that actually reflect us, right? So blockchain is neither good or evil.
Well, but I would argue, like, what China's doing, right, centralized blockchain really is about complete domination, about knowing every last thing that happens in your society.
But we already have done that.
What?
We've classified all the animals. We've classified all the seeds.
But we still have privacy. We don't have as much privacy as we might want, but we still have a lot of privacy. And the blockchain,
Where,
especially
Boo?
what?
Where do we have privacy?
Well, I'm not telling you my secrets.
I think like to so China, yeah, they're doing their thing. If you speak to somebody that's Chinese and that's kind of in alignment with the way China is moving, they'd say, hey, yeah, we love this. We love that the government knows where we are. There are some people that are like, rah, go China. There's some people in the States who feel like the United States is overstepped and we don't have enough privacy or sovereignty here, right?
Right, but the blockchain gives us that ability, right, to own your own data, to have privacy. And if you have a decentralized blockchain, one that's actually properly designed, you can have a peer-to-peer system that works.
I think what Mike is getting at is that you have the option, right? Like you have that option of self-custody. You could obviously choose a custodian if you wanted to, but having that option is something that you don't have in the Web 2 system or the Web 2 world.
There's a lot of centralizing happening on the decentralized blockchain, though, right now. For example, most of the time when an artist works with a platform, it's the platform's smart contract. It's the platform deploying that contract from their wallet, and then that means it's the platform's provenance, and technically the platform has ownership of that contract. They don't have ownership of the IP, maybe, of the work, but that's happening rampantly. I mean, millions of works are being minted that way, and that, in a sense, is anti-decentralization. I think if we want to make this good for everybody and actually make this a creator market, we have to teach the artist to fish. We have to teach the artists that they should have their own autonomous contract, that they should be deploying from their wallet, that they don't need a platform, that they could be. There's plenty of resources out there right now that allow artists to put work on their own website in like white labeled ways and sell themselves, especially if they have a big brand name.
Sovereignty is sexy. And what artists don't understand is if that platform is minting the contract and deploying from the platform's wallet, 20 years from now, 10 years from now, a year from now, 3 months from now, when we pull provenance on those NFTs, the artist's name is not there. The platform's name is there.
Because most of that metadata is off-chain, right? It's in the JSON. What Lady Fee is getting at is that when you look at the actual on-chain provenance, none of that often points to the artist.
I'm gonna
Is
move
it good
to
or bad? Is that good or bad?
No,
for the
I mean,
artist?
I totally agree with the points you're making, right? Like, I think it's steps of evolution that happen, right? First, I remember being in the space, being in plenty clubhouses with you, Lady PheOnix, and, artists would come up and be like, tell me more about NFTs. I'm sure you got just as many DMs as I did. And I'm like, all right, this is the way you go about it, the way I know. And then they're learning and evolving in the space. I've spoken to plenty of artists that initially minted on OpenSea that are now minting on their own personal contracts and are trying to figure out how to transfer what they initially minted on that contract to their own personal wallet. And I think it's an evolution, right? Like, you're not going to have a full solution from day one, but over time, we're all working towards that goal.
And we have an artist on the panel, Marguerite, who's, I think, done both. So do you have any thoughts on that as well, as someone with their own contract?
One of the most brilliant artists, by the way, in the space, a super OG. So yeah, like, respect.
I appreciate that. Actually, I had the pleasure of working with Regina on a special NFT that we did together for Christie's, and we walked through this whole process of, okay, if this is a decentralized game and everything is on chain, like, how does this need to be designed? And she was so enlightening in that aspect. But I do sometimes optimize for speed. If we're just talking about experiences, and in some cases you have a game application which is meant to be centralized. And then you have decentralized assets that interact with and they interact together. And I don't know, it depends, like you're talking about, if you want to be this artist with the provenance and making these decisions, that's all very reflective of your work, your artwork. Just like we think about a canvas and painting with these paints that will not fade over time. And these are, in the traditional sense, we make those same choices. So it really kind of depends on your space, I suppose. But I do think they're all important. I think it's just a matter of being educated and thoughtful. And the fact is that there's this big rush of buying NFTs that people didn't really understand what they were buying because they didn't understand the technology. And in that case, it can be dangerous because then you get what people feel like a rug pull in a sense, in that, like, oh, wait, I thought this was a forever thing.
Actually, I have another question for you. Can I call you coin artist? Like, that's more comfortable for me. So I know you're deep in art. I know you're deep in gaming. But do you see the gaming and the film industry and the NFTs industry somehow converging? Especially with the new paradigm, like post-corona, and people are less going to physical movie theaters and all that?
Absolutely. I think, though, one of the things is making games is very difficult. Making a great film is very difficult. And are you familiar with Bandersnatch, when Netflix did that interactive experience and it had the forking narrative? That, for them, they had so much footage from that, and then your experience of it was actually pretty short, as opposed to how much content was created. But I do imagine where you can put in gamification and user interaction. I love the future of interactive NFTs and where we can bake in those game mechanics, but then you can have short form content like a minute clip, and it can move to a new. The NFTs, there's so many things. So NFTs can evolve as your interactions. They can tell a story. They can, fork, and you can create family lineage and co-ownership over, asking users to perform certain behaviors, either individually or collectively. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, I, as a game developer, am so excited about what we can do in the world building. So it's the way to create these really immersive experiences where we bring in the user and they get to participate with the content in a way maybe they've never done before with their content creator that they might be very passionate about, like with Quentin.
Well, let me ask a question again excuse me, bringing it to film, because that's my jumping off point to use as a comparative. And look, when I'm referring to film, I'm not referring to film now. Everything has changed in a drastic way. But in the independent world that I grew up, or even wanting to be part of before I had actually made a film, I had three options. It was either maybe Roger Corman hires me to direct a women in prison movie. That would be awesome. All right. Or I get some straight-to-video company, which is what ended up happening with Reservoir Dogs, to light print script and finance it. Or I go the Coen Brothers route with Blood Simple, and then I just get a bunch of doctors and lawyers and gynecologists to invest in the film. And then, I take their investment and I make the film. Now, that third one is seemingly the best because I don't have to deal with any bosses there. If I convince them to invest in me, then my movie's my movie. I get to make the film. But at the same time, now I have to go sell it. Now I have to do this. Getting the film done is just the first part. Now, if I had made it for Roger Corman, it's going to get out there. If I made it for a video company and it's really good, like Reservoir Dogs, it actually got a theatrical release, and it did really well. It had a company behind it. Nowadays, you have these guys and girls who make films, and maybe they even make them independently on their own. But if A24 wants to buy them, they give up everything. They give them every single solitary thing. A24 buys it for pennies on the dollar. But A24 gets you Oscar nominations. A24 gets it into movie theaters. A24 makes it a real movie. So using that analogy as a thing, how does that affect when it comes to NFTs as far as working with a provider, providing yourself?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think this is where people aren't anticipating what this is really going to be like. So you've got two paths. You've got the DAO path where it's all distributed and nobody works for anybody and they come together, and that's going to have its own challenges. I'll say that's, like herding cats. You have to convince and incentivize and cajole and make sure that everybody's pointed in the same direction. And then you've got re-centralization where you can have a visionary leader who is paying people to show up and you can make sure that things get across the finish line, but then they also are going to want something for this. And we're seeing this a lot in the NFT industry. In fact, I'm going to go on record right now and predict there's going to be a big movement around orphaned NFT projects, where what happens is you have an artist and a coder, and they create something that is amazing, but they don't know how to run a company. And so they end up generating, like Bored Ape Yacht Club with Mutant Apes generated, 85 million, like in 5 minutes? So when you raise $85 million, you are now a company. And you've got to understand how to deploy your capital. You have to understand HR or DAOs. And so when you begin to see that it's actually hard to get even smart, hardworking, willing people to get pointed in the same direction and move at speed, like that's an incredibly difficult thing. And so you might be an amazing coder, an amazing artist, but sustaining that for the 20 years that you should be able to turn that into with $85 million.
Doesn't make you a CEO of a major corporation.
Exactly. And so people are going to have to cross that bridge of some people are going to realize, holy hell, centralization sprang up for a reason. And then other people are going to realize, no, decentralization is my bet, that's it, and I take the good, the bad, and the ugly. But there's going to be a real awkward teenage phase that we're going to go through as an industry where people figure out what projects work best one way, what projects work best the other way, and are going to get what I'll call unintentionally rug pulled, where the people had the best intentions, and they just don't know how to run a business.
I mean, the same thing happened. Same thing always happens, right? Same thing happened with the 2017 ICOs. Same thing happened with the 2014 alt season, which was like Bitcoin forks and all that. And honestly, same thing happened with the .com bubble, where people are just like, hey, I'm gonna put my company on NASDAQ and we'll see what we build. So, I mean, I don't know. That seems like just human behavior to me, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. But when it comes to a new generation and they didn't witness it, right? So they didn't see what happened last time. That's where it's going to get weird, especially with all the capital flowing into this. And so it'll be amazing. And look, on the other side of this is the most incredible, in any moment of disruption, you have the most incredible opportunity for people otherwise that couldn't have made it. They now have a shot. But it's this is me imploring all of the artists and creatives in this room, you have to learn business. It doesn't mean you have to centralize. It doesn't mean that you have to become the overlord that you fear that every corporation is, but it does mean that you have to think from first principles about how to organize a large project.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, in running a game company, there's so many different departments, right, in order to make the game. And one thing, a challenge I've seen, is that the NFT market is so hot, right? It's so hot that any of these one talents can go and launch a side project. And that gets really complicated with how we think about traditional businesses and how they operate. And in addition to that, like, when we're talking about these teams that get together and launch a successful NFT collection, there's so much potential experimentation to be done that as they start going, they want to iterate on these ideas. Like, that model worked. What if I add this new feature to it? And now it's a whole new project, and they've moved on, and the teams break up. You have new teams that come together. So there's also a bit of a different evolution of how we're working together.
I just add one thing too. I love what you said, Tom, because I think artists often think, okay, this is NFTs, this is decentralized, this is blockchain, I'm my own boss. But they forget to skill up, right? And learn the skill set of being their own boss, right? They think they can just offer their art and the community is going to support everything. And they walk away from the business part of running their business or having their art business. Even when you have a studio, you have a studio assistant who helps you run your business as an artist. I think that sometimes...
I'm not sure artists should be businessmen. I mean, some should if they want to. But
I'm not saying they should be businessmen, but they need to learn skill sets of business in order to actually be engaged in conversation about their art, because there's money being exchanged, there are deals being made.
Or to partner with people that are really good at it. Right?
You can partner, but you should still, it's like this. If I go to France, I need to know croissant at the very least, right? I need to know s'il vous plaît, I need to know merci. There are things that I need to know in order to be successful while in Paris, right? And so while artists are in business doing their thing on the blockchain, there's certain basic skill sets that they need to understand.
I think there's a risk. Everyone talks about the democratization of finance, and we all should be investors. It's really hard to be a good investor. It's really hard to be a good businessman. Like, when I go to the dentist, I hope we went to dental school. And so we have this thought that's going around right now that everybody should be an investor, and it's all real easy. And it feels easy because everything is going up right now. But let me tell you, having been an investor for 35 years, there's nothing easy about it. Like, the market will have its comeuppance. It just will. It's the way markets work, right? We're in this unbelievably exciting moment right now. I'm really optimistic, right? We're talking about NFTs. We haven't talked about, AR yet, and pretty soon I'll be able to put my glasses on, and you could be wearing cool, NFT jewelry or NFT clothing, and so the platforms for displaying digital goods are just being built now, and so I don't want you to think I'm bearish. I mean, we had the head of Visa in our office when they bought that CryptoPunk, and he said, right now the average Visa customer swipes their card 0.9 times a day, globally. We're betting that in 10 years, that's 10 times a day, because they'll be buying digital goods, that all our merchants are going to be selling digital goods. And so, like, Visa's a $500 billion company. They're not slouches. They're making a huge bet on this digital world, on this virtual world, the metaverse we're going to live in. And so I think it's coming. But trust me, when I see every project going straight up, and, how are these projects going to keep sustainability, right? If you create a community, that has to kind of, that IP needs to kind of be used and put in movies and to keep its relevance, unless you're really, you hit the bullseye with Kill Bill 1 and 2. Like, those will keep their relevance because they were just so good. But most movies don't, right? Even movies for, like, Patrick Swayze movies, my kids don't talk about them. I was like, Roadhouse? Come on. And so I think, it's an important point that you made. Like, most of these projects aren't going to succeed long term. And so be careful as an investor. Some of them will. The ones that will are going to have lots of creative people engaged in making them succeed.
But, I think there's also a situation, and I've seen it with a lot of my contemporaries, where it's, no, I'm never going to become an accountant, all right? And the business world doesn't interest me that much. However, I have a responsibility to myself, and I have a responsibility to what I've made to keep it, and I have a responsibility for the things that I own to protect them. And it's too much artists, when they make it, one, they never really expected to make it, and now after actually making money, they kind of want a daddy or a mommy to come in and take care of shit. And you don't want the daddy and the mommy. You need to be in the driver's seat. Now, daddy and mommy know a whole lot more than you, but they're working for you.
That's right.
And I think one of the beautiful things is it's a shade of gray, right? So it's, you can have full control over autonomy, or you could hire the right people, the people that you trust to put them in place, and everything in between. So and again, I think it just comes down to having that option, which in the current environment, you don't. And I think that that's like the true beauty of crypto and NFTs especially.
Well, I think one of the best pieces of advice I can give for something like this is, if you're starting a business kind of thing to support your company, and you have other people helping you, that's all great and everything, you got to sign the checks.
1,000%. So you got to know how to at least write. You got to know what those ones and zeros mean.
And you got to know you got to know the money going out. You got to know the money
100%.
coming in.
That's how people get taken advantage of. We can't fall asleep at the wheel and think, oh, I've hired my accountant, I've hired my business manager, I've hired my agent, they'll take care of anything and everything. That's not true. You're going to end up looking crazy at the end of the day when you're upside down. Look at Google, all the celebrities that did that. Where are they right now? Do you know their names?
Yeah.
I mean,
If you sign the checks going out, you have a clear understanding of how much you have, how much you're playing, and how much is going in and how much is going out.
and it's a part of your legacy too, right? Like you have an incredible legacy, and part of maintaining that legacy is being educated, right, on how to do so, and being educated on getting the right people on your team to support you, so you can continue having life after your flesh is with the worms.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, everything's set up for when I kick off. There was a whole thing put into place to keep my work out there, keep it out there available.
That's right. Yeah. And these NFTs are a part of that.
Yeah,
that you're
absolutely.
Dealing with Guy and Secret Network. Yeah.
So we started from art, moving that to NFTs, and then data provenance, and now controlling your own business or decentralized businesses. So which is it? I mean, which one of these are NFTs about, or are they about all of these?
All of it.
So, but how do you prioritize? And is there a room for separate ones? Is there a room for NFTs who are just digital paintings, nothing else, no 10-year horizon? NFTs are games. NFTs are
Your healthcare records are going to be NFTs in 5 years or
That's
10
right.
years.
And
Your healthcare records. Right now, you go to the doctors, and if you're in the
oh God, I hope not.
state, it's a death.
At least not with the current privacy measures. But yeah.
But they're all going to be NFTs, right? I mean, so NFT doesn't necessarily only mean art, right? It's a non-fungible token that can have personal data on it. That data can be money in Bitcoin. I mean, the genius of Bitcoin really was, or Satoshi was, it was the first digital signature you couldn't counterfeit. And once you kind of got to that understanding, that's what Satoshi's white paper did for us. He gave us something digital you couldn't counterfeit. And now we can have all kinds of things. Quentin's script, or your gorgeous art, or someone's song, and it's unique because it lives on blockchain. And so, healthcare records. Why do I have to have one at this hospital and one at this hospital? And if I get in an accident somewhere, they're calling, right? It should be in my wallet. Our wallets are going to, your bank accounts are going to be wallets. They're going to have our healthcare records. They're going to have our Bitcoin. They're going to have our NFTs, our opera tickets. And so that's the future we're going to. It's happening faster than most of us imagined. But kind of close your eyes, and in 10 years, and I think you're going to see a completely different way we interact.
Yeah, to build on that, one thing I tell people all the time to help them conceptualize NFTs is everything in the real world is an NFT, right? Like your house is an NFT, a mortgage is an NFT, your car. So if you think more things will be going digital over time in a decentralized blockchain, they're coming on chain as NFTs. So we're starting with art and we're building from there.
And what's the value of doing that as an NFT over a blockchain, right? As opposed to how it's been done for 20 years. My realtor, my country has a real estate database for all the houses.
Right, I mean, just digital sovereignty, right? And true digital ownership. Right now, there's a centralized database at your town ledger, right? That if the town all of a sudden decided, oh, you don't own this property anymore, you don't own it. You have to go to court and file it and try to get it back. But
Gaddafi actually did that. When he took over, he burned all the property records and said, you know what, it's mine now, right? Think about that. And so if at least it was on a blockchain, you could have come back when he was thrown in the can and said, actually, it was mine. It says it right here.
I think something to keep in mind too that that we'll hear more about is data rights are human rights, right? I think that's the one thing that we often don't talk about, and sovereignty and data rights, those are actually human rights. So as you're moving forward with NFTs and self-sovereignty and data, really think about that as your absolute human right to own your data, to do with your data what you wish and what you will, even your health data, right? Right now, we exchange certain data to use Gmail, right? So we give up certain rights so that we can have the service. In the future, in a very, very near future, you may have to opt in to have your data used just to get health insurance, right? So we have to, not to be the wet blanket on this positive NFT conversation, but I think sometimes as we talk about NFTs in the future, we aren't actually talking about it in a way that's real and anchored in reality, right? Like an open metaverse as opposed to a closed metaverse, and what does that look like? We're bringing who we are into a digital future, and unless we modify who we are for the betterment of ourselves, but our actual future and the people we share the planet with, we're going to replicate and see very much of the same issues in the metaverse, in our NFTs, in ownership, in sovereignty. So please, really I implore you to think about that.
So what got me into crypto and researching privacy and blockchain and building Secret Network was the fact that I do believe that blockchain is the neutral layer for you to be able to control your own data, whether it's done through NFTs, whether it's done through some other digital records and means or smart contracts or whatnot. But I am fully on board with that. But I do think we should not turn a blind eye. Again, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but still, unfortunately, to me, that's a danger. A lot of the systems around blockchains are becoming more and more centralized and re-centralized. It's like blockchain on top, AWS underneath, because that's where you keep the sensitive data. Again, that's what we are interested about in Secret NFTs and Secret Network in general, because we need more decentralized mechanisms that keep that neutral layer, allow you to control your own data, but without actually sweeping it under the rug with something like, a company running an AWS instance.
This is where I think people have to understand that what you're witnessing is a psychology game around humans, right? So once you understand how the human mind works, you can start to think from first principles in terms of predicting things. So the online version of people is going to be very similar to the offline version of people because that's how the human mind works. And so avoiding selfishness and things like that is going to be a dead-end game because you cannot just simply convince humans to not be selfish. What you can do is get them to follow incentives. And so if you make the incentives right, then they will do the behaviors that you want. But it's like, what was it? Either Charlie Munger or Warren Buffett said, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. And so once you understand what the incentives are of a system, then you can get it. So the centralization works because it's simple, right? So for instance, I would put things from my NFT project on the blockchain, but the blockchain will reject files of a certain size. So I literally can't. So even if I wanted to, even if I was willing to throw money at it, I'd either have to build my own blockchain and change the limits or make the file size smaller. And so until we get to the point where the incentives get people to do the behaviors that you want that make the world a better place, people are going to struggle and be confused by how people are acting. But this is literally just a game of cultural energy and human psychology.
I just wanted to say that just because you can't put more than, say, 25 kilobytes on the blockchain without it being enormously expensive, you can use distributed storage technologies like IPFS and Arweave, which still use a block-like system, even though it's not a blockchain. It still is decentralized and follows that philosophy. And it actually does go back to the centralization issues, right? You go on one of these platforms and they tell you, oh, we can't upload more than 50 megabytes or 100 megabytes because the platform's dictating that because of the traffic and the bandwidth they're willing to pay for, right? But then there's so many tools becoming more and more user-friendly every day for you to upload. Right now, it's very easy to upload up to 50 gigabytes, which most artists don't realize. And I've helped artists upload more than 250 gigabytes onto a distributed storage network. So it's possible. It just always goes back to educating and teaching artists how to fish.
Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. So IPFS, right, Interplanetary File Service, that is exactly making easy the thing that would otherwise be very hard. And so that, when you get to incentives, is what I'm saying. The infrastructure hasn't been built on a lot of this stuff yet. So if you want to understand how people are going to move, understand sort of the average human psychology, how people approach things. But as this stuff gets more interconnected, and if we put the right incentives in place, then we can get the outcome that we want. But going back to, not something I ever thought I was going to mention, but going back to the debate over is the way China is handling things good or bad, you can see how even that you can't get people to agree on. And so the blockchain allowing people to have choice and then letting people aggregate around that choice is ultimately how this will play out. And what's interesting is there's a tremendous amount of social pressure within the community now because we're small. But as it gets bigger, I promise it will default to natural human behavior. And so you can sort of, if you've read the book Nudge, you can nudge people and it can have big effects, but ultimately try to leverage behavior instead of fighting against it. Figure out how people are, nudge them in the direction you want to go, and then take advantage of that natural momentum.
Oh, I also just quickly wanted to mention that I mentioned 250 gigabytes is the most that I've ever personally uploaded. Your average DCP, like a digital cinema package, which goes back to film, a 90-minute one is like only 113 gigabytes. So you could upload 90-minute films right now as NFTs.
Actually, amazing conversation. I want to go a step back and actually bring this back to the film industry, because to me, if we don't talk about this, that's a missed opportunity. I think with COVID and with streaming services on the rise and less like moviegoers, if we're being honest, and like, you know, publishing movies in theaters, but at the same time on streaming services, like there's a paradigm shift happening in Hollywood right now. And Quentin, I hope that's okay to ask, but like I'm kind of curious, like, what are your thoughts in where this is going? And then we can kind of build up and understand, like, you know, how the blockchain NFT space could take a part in that.
I get asked this a lot, and I can honestly say I don't know. I really, really don't know. I think it's to be determined. But the thing about it, the one thing that I do know, so where it's going to go and what's going to happen, I don't know. My guess is I actually think more boutique theaters, cinemas will be able to survive because they truly offer something different than what the streaming services offer or what the big chains offer. And that's not me being down on any of the big chains. It's simply the boutique cinemas offer something that you can't get anywhere else, especially if they show on film. You know, what I guess about the one thing I do know is that when it comes to me releasing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at the movie theater in 2019, I feel like a bird that just flew through a windowsill just as the window slammed shut. And all the other birds that came out with movies that last year just smashed bloodily against the window. I mean, as far as, when it comes to as far as releasing a movie in the world that I knew of movies coming out in, because, you know, we did pretty good box office, all right, all around the world. But that box office we did, it was asses in seats. And I know we could not make that money today as far as just asses in seats because of what's happened.
Does anyone else has an idea where this is
Where you
going?
think the industry is going?
Yep.
So I think that it goes almost entirely to streaming. I think that what you have to watch is how kids are raised. And so for them, it just becomes self-evident that that's how it is. So to kids now, it is self-evident that you'll get paid to play video games. It is self-evident that you can be a creator within those worlds. It is self-evident that you can stream any movie you want at any time. It's self-evident that most things are actually shows and not films. And so the energy suck into Hollywood has gone away from films. Like in the 90s, goddamn, like you didn't want to be on TV, you wanted to be in film. It was just so obvious. And now, it went through a phase where it wasn't obvious, and now, quite frankly, with very few exceptions, the heavy-hitting talent is going into TV because of that binge mode watch. It's just a part of it. And then dual screens, like, it's a reality. So if you know people are going to fuck around on their phone while they're watching something, like, get them in the NFT, get them in the Discord for what they're watching. so that they can literally watch it, buy a piece of the film or TV show, and interact with the people, and then P.S. take that skin and go play the game. That's where this is going, because that's how kids will be raised. Their brains will be wired for it. They won't think any other way. And this goes back to that idea. As a business person, I would just tell you, I'm so curious to know what you think about this. Like as a CEO, I'm always thinking, don't try to change behavior. Try to leverage it, because people act in some kind of way. So at Quest, I know people will eat cookies, cakes, pies, and ice cream. So I'm just going to make that shit healthy. And that was the mission, was make it so people could choose food that they were choosing based on taste, and it happened to be good for them, because that's how people choose food, rather than try to convince them to be healthy. So it's like, if we can see how the behavior is changing, now how do you make that dope? Like, how do you get that same effect? Like, you know, as film buffs, you know that emotion you're trying to create. And when what you see on the Steenbeck or the Avid actually ends up happening on the screen in the theater, that's like the greatest feeling in the world, and it sticks with people long after. But that's all you're actually looking for, is for them to have that emotional response and for that story to become a part of them. And so even though the way that they engage with that story changes, the emotion doesn't.
Well, my biggest question around this is that for me, it's not just about emotion, it's also about the materiality of film. And as a director who has chosen to do all of their films on 35 millimeter to 60 millimeter Kodak, like, what does it mean to you to hear this? I mean, obviously, most theaters can't show film anymore. They're going to be shown as DCPs anyway. But if you care about that materiality and you care about a cinematographer using film, like, what does that mean when we're moving in this direction to you?
It's mean that this is not new right now. So since the turn to digital has happened for the last 8 years, I guess, it's television in public. Yeah. It's television in public. You're basically putting on a DVD. And that's even getting it to, you're putting on a video, a VHS, basically. All right, it might as well be a VHS compared to a good 35 millimeter print. You're watching a big video on television in public, as opposed to the pull of 24 frames a second and the shutter effect going through, and also just even the hard work it took to make the print, and even the fact that, like, you know, you're not going to get that nostalgic about an old DVD you had, all right, sitting on the TV. You're not going to get nostalgic about an old video cassette you had. Well, I might get nostalgic about that, but most people won't. But you look at a 35 millimeter. I buy say I get through a collector circuit. I get a 35 millimeter print beat up of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I've got it sitting in 4 tin metal cans with the reels there. What could that film tell me? That was probably struck in 1974. Where did it play? What are all the different audiences this film print entertained? Who are all the different projectionists who touched it and fucked it up and scratched it, and then also the guys who repaired it? You know, if this print could talk, how many people has this print entertained? I don't have that kind of romanticism about anything else. That's that. It's a bunch of still frames that when you put through you throw at a certain speed through a light, it creates the illusion of movement. That's not a DVD. That's not streaming a thing on a computer.
I think too, though, speaking of that love, I think that cinema will be interactive. Marguerite brought up Bandersnatch. I think that with cinema and a lot of television shows, I think that it will involve the community, and I think that will be choose your own adventure, where the community has say, and even the NFTs themselves, you know, in the smart contract, there'll be performance.
But let me ask you a question about that, because whenever I've heard that, that just sounds like, and when I say just, I don't mean just because that sounds like an incredible amount of work, but it sounds like a situation of, like, the protagonist gets to this fork in the road and then go this way, and they can go this way, and then they go this way, and then it's up to you to figure out everything that could happen if they go this way and everything that could happen if they go. But is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, you can build all of that in essentially into the smart contract and in the way the NFT like performs, so to speak. Right?
But that's a lot of writing.
Right.
As a writer, that's a lot of
but
writing.
hold on, but it's a lot of writing, but also the stakes, right? And Tom kind of spoke to this earlier with, you know, people really wanting to, like he said, he paid millions of dollars, right, to be involved on one tiny piece of that film. Well, imagine the person who's going to pay millions of dollars to actually have an impact, right, on the ending of the film or on, the climax of the film. People will pay for that. People want to pay for that, and I think NFTs will.
I'm not sure it makes better film though.
Well, I mean, that's the experience.
Most filmmakers are trying to make art because they want to move people, not just to make money.
Yeah, I mean,
No, I'm not saying it's just to make money. What I'm saying is it has an emotional impact and it has like a materiality impact. People want to be a part of what they're consuming.
Well, I would. Did I just turn my thing off? Or did everything turn on? Hello? Okay. I can see where that sounds like that could be fun, but also part of the art of storytelling is making the decisions and putting the characters through certain situations, and then there are repercussions because of the situations they take. If I had to follow the scenario, 3 different scenarios, all the way to the bitter end, and forget about all the different folks on the road I would need to put inside of those 3 different scenarios, Jesus Christ, I never get anything done.
But I mean, maybe it's your ultimate film, and then you kick the can and you go on to see Elvis. I mean,
but no, actually, I'm saying it sarcastically. I'm not actually.
Too, by the way, I don't want you to go and see Elvis right away.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying it sarcastically. I'm not saying that that's a completely creative dead end, but I wouldn't have had one to have to do that for every story I ever told.
No, just one. I think, listen.
Just one. There you go.
It can be an unpopular opinion. I think people want to have impact on the things that they're consuming and collecting. I think audiences will want, in a Bandersnatch way, to be able to choose left or right. And I think that creators who build for that, kind of like, in a small way, I guess, like Jones, Phillips. Mad Dog Jones, yeah, where his NFTs actually had life, where they replicated, where they died, where they procreated and created new things. There was impact, right, on the NFTs. There was more than just like buying the NFTs. I think sometimes when people make NFTs, they don't think about what happens after the drop. I think NFTs, like one of Marguerite's puzzles took someone like 2 or 3 years to solve. That's exciting. Like, people want to be a part of that with their NFTs. They don't want to just collect stuff and have it sit in their wallet. Like, we have to be more intelligent about the way we're bringing NFTs forward and have to really consider the collector and the audience. That's all I'm saying. And for me, my personal prediction is that, movies will have a more participatory media will be more popular.
But I actually think where you're coming from, though, that makes it especially pertain to the NFT as opposed to old mediums.
Well, this is a new medium.
Yeah,
for
I
new
know.
audience.
No. But what I'm saying, though, you're making a point about that with that. All right, that's the point of it. That's the point. This is open up for that. Where that's not really realistic for film. And it's not really realistic for a novel. And it's not really realistic for a lot of things. But for this, it could be very realistic.
Right. No, you only have one more film, so I don't think you're going to make that one interactive.
But so I don't think it needs to be necessarily a choose your own adventure for like the end consumer, right? There's already projects popping up in the space where there's like a writer's room, right? Like, you buy the NFT, if you want to be part of the creative process and you want to be writing, you can be part of that DAO and you can interact with like the director and the creator and stuff, and whatever they create, the end consumer consumes. So like, not everybody wants to choose your own adventure. Not everybody wants to be part of the creative process, but like, I think, again, that's the beauty of what the space is at right now.
Doesn't that dilute, a screenwriter puts a lot of time, a lot of thought, all of his art into this. Don't you get to a situation where you have too many cooks in the kitchen?
No, but I mean, I think that there's one project in particular that's working on this. That if people are passionate about this, I'm sure, Quentin, if you had 20 writers that were super passionate about your films and love your style and love your directive, I'm sure you'd at least be interested in stuff they might have to say. You have total creative control, but it's great to have other ideas, right?
Yeah.
I would just like to add that so there are NFTs that are created that are based on a user's something that identifies a user, like a hash or something particular to a user when they're minting. And so the generative art is a way that we're tying in individuality to a piece where the user's putting their own touch on it according to an algorithm. And Artbox, for example, is a project where there's a lot of generative art or algorithmic productions in which get really creative in how we can make using basically computer science to generate images. And so I think that there's room to create content like forking narratives, I think there's even a text generator in that way, to experiment with using computer science, because the content is king. The in games, like its content is king, right? How much content can you make? If that is your main monetization angle.
All right. How much time do we have, by the way? I know who's keeping track. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna end with one question. Quentin, you announced to me this is like the most I'm biased, but to me it's the most interesting project I've seen in the NFT space. We brainstormed a lot. I was very excited about it. Anything else you want to say about that upcoming project or maybe future projects in the NFT space?
Well, I don't want to do a commercial for about it here, the panel or anything like that. Yeah, I don't want to do a commercial on it or something like that.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.